Fulton Police Chief says his officers did their job, bringing 4 domestic violence type cases against one woman last year who got bond. And now the department has arrested her for murder. Same victim.
Another crime, another life lost. This isn't just a number in a report. It's the heartbreaking story of a young mother whose life was taken by the very person she once trusted and loved. Corneisha Butler, a 32-year-old mother of 4, had worked hard for this life. On November 16, 2022, just days before the holiday, everything shattered. Inside the very home she worked so hard for, Corneisha was shot 3 times. Her 2-year-old child stood nearby, watching the nightmare unfold. The shooter wasn't hiding in the shadows. She had a name, Shakia Perkins, Corneisha's ex-girlfriend of 6 years. This wasn't a sudden attack. It had been building for a long time. There were police reports, text messages filled with threats, and even a restraining order. Corneisha had done everything she could to protect herself and her kids. She asked for help. She followed the law, but no one stopped what was coming, and the system failed her. A home meant to be safe became the scene of her death. Her children lost their mother. A life full of hope and strength was taken too soon. And still, the questions remain. How would you know if someone close to you could turn deadly? What would you do if love turned into a threat? Think about it, because sometimes danger doesn't knock, it walks right through the front door. As we continue the video, we are going to share the life story of Corneisha Butler, a strong and lively mother of 4 who dreamed of a better life. Corneisha was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, but she later moved to Atlanta, Georgia, hoping for more opportunities for herself and her children. She wanted to give her family a brighter future, and she was willing to work hard for it. Corneisha wasn't just a dreamer, she was a doer. She built a solid career for herself in 2 different fields. She worked as a tax preparer, helping people file their taxes, and she also became a skilled esthetician, offering beauty and skincare services to her clients. Her dedication paid off. Eventually, she was able to buy a beautiful 5-bedroom home, a house she had always dreamed of owning. To everyone around her, Corneisha seemed like a woman who was making it in life. She was successful, stylish, and full of life. Her personality stood out wherever she went. She had a big smile, a warm heart, and a laugh that could light up any room. People described her as outgoing, caring, and always ready to celebrate life. Whether it was a party or a hard moment, Corneisha was the one people turned to for fun, comfort, or support. She was the kind of person who would lift you up when you felt low. But that generous heart, the same heart that made her such a beautiful person, also put her in danger. This story is not only about her achievements, but also about the dark side of her life, a toxic and dangerous relationship that slowly destroyed her happiness and eventually her life. As you listen, you'll see how things got worse over time, from small signs of trouble to full-blown danger. We'll talk about the warning signs that many people missed or ignored. From burned cars to direct death threats, the red flags were everywhere. Yet somehow, help never came in time. Corneisha tried to protect herself. She didn't stay silent. She took legal action to stay safe. She reported her abuser. She followed the rules and trusted the justice system to help her. But that system failed her, again and again. Her abuser was arrested but kept getting released on bail more than once. Each time the danger returned, and each time Corneisha was left to live in fear. Everything she did, every choice she made, was with her children in mind. She had 4 kids, 3 daughters and 1 son, and they were the center of her universe. They were her reason to wake up each day, her motivation to work hard, and the light that kept her going even when times were tough. Corneisha poured her bright, lively energy into being a mom. Her home was full of joy. Laughter rang through the rooms. Music played often. Even the smallest wins, like a good grade or a completed chore, were reasons to celebrate. She made everyday life feel special. Her children didn't just feel loved, they felt seen, heard, and important. On social media, Corneisha proudly shared these family moments. You could scroll through her posts and see her deep love for her kids. There were photos of first days of school, colorful birthday parties, and festive holiday celebrations. Each picture told a story of a mother who was doing her best to give her children a life full of happiness and chances she never had. Friends admired how Corneisha often put her children's needs before her own. She wasn't afraid to go without so her kids could have what they needed, and even a few extras. If the children needed new clothes for school, she made it happen. If they wanted a fun weekend trip or a special toy for their birthday, she found a way to give it to them. Those little moments created big memories. Family was everything to Corneisha. She loved bringing people together, especially during the holidays. Thanksgiving was one of her favorites. She would prepare big, delicious meals and decorate her home with care. Her house felt warm and welcoming. It was a place where love was shared and traditions were built, the kind her children would remember forever. Corneisha's hard work didn't stop at home. She had a strong mind and a creative spirit, and she used both in her career. She had not just one job, but two. First, she worked as a tax preparer. This wasn't just a side hustle. She was officially registered with the IRS and helped many people sort out their finances. Her clients trusted her. They said she was careful, smart, and dependable. She could handle complicated paperwork with skill, and she made sure people got the help they needed. At the same time, Corneisha worked as an aesthetician. She offered beauty treatments, skincare, makeup, and more. This job allowed her to be creative and connect with people in a different way. She helped others feel confident and beautiful, and she took pride in that. Corneisha was naturally entrepreneurial. She wasn't someone who waited for chances to come to her. She went out and created them. She was always learning, growing, and finding new ways to increase her income. She wanted to build something lasting, not just for herself, but for her children's future too. It wasn't easy to leave the place where she had grown up. Memphis had shaped her values, her strength, and her style. But she knew that to reach the next level, she needed to go where there were more opportunities. Atlanta was a bigger city with more potential for business, and she believed she could make it there, and she was right. In Atlanta, Corneisha started building the life she had always dreamed of. She worked hard, made new clients, and expanded her network. Her life was a powerful mix of hard work, love, and determination. Corneisha was a woman who never gave up. She believed in rising above struggles, and she wanted her children to know they could do the same. But even with all her strength, there was one battle she was quietly fighting, a toxic relationship that would become her greatest danger. As we continue her story, we'll look deeper into the signs that something was wrong and how that relationship slowly turned into a threat that could no longer be ignored. Her home in Atlanta was a powerful symbol of everything she had worked for. It wasn't just a place to live. For Corneisha, it meant success, safety, and progress. After everything she had been through in life, the struggles, the setbacks, the sacrifices, that house represented how far she had come. It stood as proof that with determination, dreams really could come true. But even in a beautiful home, trouble can sometimes find its way in. Corneisha first met Shakia Perkins around 2016 while still living in Memphis. Their connection happened fast. Friends who watched it unfold said there was an instant spark between them. From the beginning, Shakia, or Shaki as she was often called, came on strong. She showed her love in big, dramatic ways. There were surprise gifts, romantic gestures, and public expressions of affection. Shaki seemed deeply invested, making bold promises of love and lifelong support. For Corneisha, who had been in relationships with both men and women before, this new romance felt like it could finally be the one. After years of doing everything on her own, she thought maybe she had found a true partner, someone who would stand by her side and share the load. In those early months, everything looked perfect from the outside. They seemed to click naturally. They liked the same things, spent time with the same group of friends, and understood each other's personalities. Corneisha's bubbly, outgoing nature brought energy into every room. Shaki, who was more quiet and reserved, balanced that energy. Together, they looked like the perfect pair. Very quickly, their relationship deepened. Shaki didn't just date Corneisha, she became a part of her world. She began spending more and more time with the family, building bonds with Corneisha's children and stepping into the role of co-parent. Corneisha welcomed this support. After years of raising kids mostly on her own, having someone to help must have felt like a huge relief. Within just 6 months of dating, Shaki moved into Corneisha's home. Things were moving fast, but to their friends and family, it all seemed like a love story unfolding. A strong couple blending their lives together, chasing a future side by side. But underneath the smiles and sweet social media posts, something darker was beginning to form. Something that wasn't yet visible to the outside world. At first, the changes were small and easy to ignore. A little argument here, a bit of jealousy there. But slowly, those moments started to pile up. The passionate romance that had brought them so close was beginning to shift into something more controlling, more intense in a way that felt less like love and more like possession. Looking back, those honeymoon days, full of flowers, promises, and affection, now feel like a cover for what was to come. The relationship, once so full of hope, was beginning to take a turn. And as it did, the bright, joyful world Corneisha had built for her children and herself began to face a serious threat, one she didn't yet fully see, and one those around her never imagined would end in tragedy. As Corneisha and Shaki's relationship deepened, the warning signs started to appear, but they were subtle at first. At first, everything still seemed fine. Friends of Corneisha noticed some little things, like how Shaki would often check Corneisha's phone or ask too many questions about where she had been and who she was with. At first, it seemed like Shaki was just being protective, but over time, it became clear that this behavior wasn't about concern, it was about control. Shaki's jealousy didn't just stop at worrying about other women. It started to include everyone in Corneisha's life. She was suspicious of Corneisha's friendships, even with family members. There were times when Shaki would create drama before family events or get upset when Corneisha planned to attend gatherings. As a result, Corneisha would sometimes have to cancel or avoid important events just to calm Shaki down and keep the peace. And when Corneisha succeeded in her career, things started to get worse. Instead of celebrating her accomplishments, Shaki would downplay them or make hurtful comments. Corneisha worked hard to build her career, but instead of pride, she often felt undermined, as if Shaki didn't want her to succeed. Another concerning pattern emerged in their finances. Shaki was not contributing much to household expenses, but she still felt the need to question Corneisha's spending decisions. If Corneisha bought something without asking Shaki first, it would lead to arguments. Shaki would create tension over purchases, even though she wasn't helping to pay for things. This behavior became more frequent after they moved to Atlanta. Corneisha's business was growing, and with that success, Shaki's insecurities seemed to grow as well. Shaki began to question everything, especially when Corneisha thrived. But the most troubling part of their relationship was Shaki's temper. Small disagreements could turn into massive explosions of anger. Once the outburst happened, it was followed by weeks of extreme remorse and affection. Shaki would apologize, promise things would change, and show a softer side that had originally drawn Corneisha in. This emotional roller coaster left Corneisha walking on eggshells. She had to be careful about what she said or did, always adjusting herself to avoid triggering another fight. Family members and friends who tried to speak up or express their concern began to be pushed away. Slowly, Shaki isolated Corneisha from people who might question the relationship or offer different perspectives. This isolation allowed Shaki to maintain control and keep Corneisha more dependent on her. By 2018, the relationship had settled into a toxic pattern. Explosive arguments would lead to dramatic breakups, followed by passionate reconciliations. Each breakup lasted longer than the last, and during those times apart, Corneisha sometimes started dating other people. This only made Shaki's jealousy worse. When they got back together, Shaki would promise that things would be different, that she had learned, that things would change for the better. For weeks, sometimes even months, the relationship would improve. Shaki would attend therapy sessions, work on being patient, and show the attention that Corneisha had fallen in love with. These periods of calm gave Corneisha hope that things could really change. She began to believe that the good moments could last forever, but those good times were always temporary. Slowly, the emotional highs and lows started to wear down Corneisha. She would explain to her friends that when things were good, they were really good. She held on to that hope, even as things deteriorated again and again. This is common in abusive relationships. The victim gets caught in the cycle of separation, reconciliation, and promises of change. It creates what's called a trauma bond, a strong emotional connection that becomes harder and harder to break, even when the relationship is clearly unhealthy. Despite seeing the unhealthy patterns, Corneisha stayed in the relationship. She would tell herself that the love they shared was worth the struggles. The emotional pain that came with the arguments and the constant conflict became harder to recognize or admit. As long as the good times felt real, it was easier to forget the bad ones. By early 2021, the relationship had become even more volatile. What had started as just verbal arguments escalated into physical destruction. In March of that year, during an argument, Shaki lost control completely. In a fit of rage, she smashed Corneisha's phone and laptop, two things that were not only important to Corneisha's personal life, but also to her work. She destroyed the tools that Corneisha used to stay connected to her business and her clients, all in one angry outburst. The destruction wasn't just of property. It was a blow to Corneisha's sense of security. She began to lose the things that had given her independence and confidence. Her ability to work and communicate was taken away in that moment. It wasn't just about the broken devices. It was about control. Shaki wanted to control Corneisha's life, her choices, and her career, and it was working. Corneisha had a growing awareness of the danger, but the emotional pull of the relationship was strong. The trauma bond made it hard for her to break free. This cycle of love, loss, and anger was taking its toll. As the relationship continued, the question remains: how much longer was Corneisha keeping up with this dangerous dance before it was too late? As the months passed, the tension in Corneisha and Shaki's relationship grew, and the violence that had once been private started to spill into the public eye. One summer evening, neighbors heard loud screaming coming from their home. Concerned, they called the police. Though Corneisha chose not to press charges that time, it marked an important shift. The violence wasn't just confined to their home anymore. It was becoming visible, something that couldn't be ignored. The situation reached a terrifying peak in January 2022 when Corneisha attempted to break up with Shaki for good. She had finally made the decision to end the relationship, hoping to move on with her life. But within days of that breakup, something happened that made her fear for her safety more than ever. Her beloved pink Mercedes, a car that had become a symbol of her hard work and success, was found burned in her driveway. Security footage showed Shaki near the scene, but the evidence wasn't enough to make an arrest. This attack was a clear warning, but it didn't stop there. Just 3 months later, Corneisha's Jeep Wrangler was also set on fire in a similar act of destruction. As the year went on, the threats from Shaki became even more chilling. By autumn 2022, things took a deadly turn. After Corneisha's death, police recovered text messages from Shaki that made the danger all too clear. One message read, "You will be dead soon, and I'm going for first degree, not second degree." These words were no longer just threats, they were a promise. Despite Corneisha having obtained a restraining order against Shaki in October 2022, the harassment didn't stop. In fact, it only seemed to escalate. In the months leading up to her tragic death, Corneisha contacted the police at least 6 times, reporting violations of the protective order. She was trying to protect herself, but the system wasn't able to stop Shaki from getting closer and continuing the harassment. As we reflect on Corneisha's story, it's important to ask ourselves, have you ever witnessed a relationship where control was mistaken for care? Could you recognize when possessiveness crosses the line into danger? Take a moment to think about your own relationships, or those of people you care about. Could you identify the warning signs if someone was in a similar situation? Now let's continue to look at the deeper struggles Corneisha faced. The shift from emotional abuse to physical violence didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, dangerous progression that took months to fully unfold. The first physical incident happened in December 2020. During an argument, Shaki grabbed Corneisha's wrist with such force that it left visible bruises. Corneisha, however, downplayed the injury to her friends, brushing it off as an accident during a heated argument. She didn't want to admit to herself, or anyone else, that the violence had crossed a line. But by February 2021, the violence escalated further. What had started as a bruise quickly turned into pushing and shoving. Neighbors reported hearing loud crashes from their home and even saw Corneisha with a split lip. Yet again, Corneisha refused medical attention and downplayed the situation when anyone asked her about it. She tried to minimize it, convincing herself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. This pattern of increasing violence seemed to coincide with Corneisha's growing success in Atlanta. As her career thrived and she built a better life for herself, it seemed that Shaki's control over her life was slipping. This loss of control triggered more anger, more violence, and more attempts to tear Corneisha down. It was as if Shaki couldn't handle seeing Corneisha succeed on her own, and the abuse became more severe as a result. Corneisha, despite the warning signs and escalating violence, continued to try to hold on to the relationship, convincing herself that things would get better. But the physical and emotional toll it took on her was becoming too much. She was stuck in a cycle of love and pain, where every period of calm was followed by another explosion of anger. Each time she believed it would be the last, but it wasn't. And eventually, that dangerous cycle would come to a tragic end. What do you think? Could Corneisha have gotten out earlier? Could someone have helped her see the danger before it was too late? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep going with Corneisha's story. The situation between Corneisha and Shaki kept getting worse. One of the most disturbing incidents happened in April 2021, when Shaki took things too far. After Corneisha returned home late from work, Shaki locked her children outside the house during a rainstorm. This was the first time Shaki's anger extended to hurt Corneisha's children directly. Corneisha's kids, who had always been her world, were now part of the control Shaki seemed to have over her life. As the abuse continued, Shaki's behavior became more destructive. It wasn't just about hurting Corneisha physically or emotionally anymore. She began to target the things that represented Corneisha's independence, success, and hard work. In March 2022, Corneisha's home salon equipment, the essential tools for her aesthetician business, was destroyed. Expensive products were poured out onto the floor, and the equipment was damaged beyond repair. This was more than just an attack on property. It was a direct strike at Corneisha's livelihood. But the violence didn't stop there. The burning of Corneisha's cars marked a dramatic escalation. The pink Mercedes, which had become a symbol of her success, was more than just a car to Corneisha. It was customized with her business logo, making it not just transportation, but also a mobile advertisement for her entrepreneurial journey. One morning at 2:15 a.m., security footage showed a figure who looked like Shaki approaching the car. By 2:30 a.m., the car was completely engulfed in flames. Corneisha reported her suspicions to the police, but there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. Just 3 months later, her replacement vehicle, a Jeep Wrangler, was set on fire as well. This time, clearer footage from a neighbor's security camera caught a figure near the car, but Shaki's face was still partly covered, making it impossible to fully identify her. The police questioned Shaki, but without solid proof, no arrest was made. These acts of destruction were terrifying, but they were just the beginning. There were many smaller acts of vandalism that continued to send the same cruel message. Shaki slashed Corneisha's tires, broke windows, damaged the garden, and even destroyed the children's bicycles. Every act was a reminder. No matter where Corneisha went or what she did, Shaki could reach her and destroy what she valued most. As the violence escalated, so did the threats. The messages Shaki sent became more aggressive, more dangerous. It's heartbreaking to think about how these threats and acts of violence became a constant in Corneisha's life. Even though she had taken legal steps to protect herself, like getting a restraining order, it didn't stop Shaki from continuing her campaign of terror. Each new threat, each new act of destruction, only proved how little the legal system could protect Corneisha from the person who had vowed to destroy her. Shaki's actions went beyond just sending messages and making phone calls. She began to stalk Corneisha, making her feel unsafe every day. Shaki would show up unexpectedly at Corneisha's workplace, sometimes standing outside for hours without saying a word. Clients even reported seeing her parked across from Corneisha's house on multiple occasions. One day, Corneisha's oldest daughter found a note on her school backpack, and it was clear only Shaki could have left it there. But the most chilling part was the phone calls. Shaki would call from unknown numbers and just breathe into the phone, not saying anything. Later, phone records showed these calls came from burner phones that Shaki had bought, which showed how carefully she was planning her psychological attacks on Corneisha. In October 2022, Corneisha took legal steps to protect herself. She went to court and got a restraining order that kept Shaki from coming within 500 feet of her home, her workplace, or her children's schools. The court papers listed 27 separate incidents where Shaki had harassed Corneisha, made threats, or damaged her property over the past year. But even with the restraining order, things didn't get better. Corneisha reported 6 violations in the first 3 weeks, but the police response was slow. Sometimes officers didn't show up until hours later. After the 3rd violation, Corneisha was told to just keep documenting what happened, but without a physical confrontation, there wasn't much the police could do. The restraining order, instead of stopping Shaki, seemed to make her more determined. Court records show Shaki missed a scheduled hearing and then refused to sign the final order when it was served to her. One officer noted that Shaki said, "Papers don't stop bullets." At the time, no one took this comment seriously, but sadly, it would prove to be a tragic prediction. Despite the restraining order, Shaki kept watching Corneisha and planning what would turn out to be her final violent act. Shaki Perkins had a long history of interactions with the legal system before Corneisha's death. South Fulton police had documented 4 separate domestic violence cases involving her, creating a clear pattern of her violent behavior. This should have led to stronger protective actions. The first case, in May 2021, involved Shaki pushing Corneisha down a flight of stairs during an argument, leading to a charge of simple battery. Despite clear evidence, including photos of Corneisha's injuries, the case only resulted in probation for Shaki. The second case, in February 2022, was about Shaki destroying Corneisha's business equipment. She faced charges for criminal damage to property and making terroristic threats, as she had allegedly threatened to burn everything Corneisha valued. This case was still open when the third case appeared in April, following the arson of Corneisha's Mercedes. In this instance, Shaki was charged with aggravated assault and first-degree arson, both serious felonies that should have carried significant consequences. The fourth and final case came in October 2022, when Shaki violated the restraining order by showing up at Corneisha's workplace. By this point, Shaki had already been involved in 4 separate cases within a year and a half, each escalating in severity. Yet the legal process moved slowly, and none of these cases were resolved by the time of Corneisha's murder. A major flaw in the legal system's handling of Shaki's case was its approach to bail. Despite the growing severity of Shaki's actions and the pending charges, judges repeatedly allowed her to be released on bail. After the arson charge, she was granted a $20,000 bond just 2 days after her arrest. When she violated the restraining order, she should have had her bail revoked, but instead, a new bond of $5,000 was set, which Shaki paid quickly. Court records show that the courts did not take into account her escalating violence or the serious threats she had made. South Fulton Police Chief Keith Meadows later acknowledged the system's failure, saying that if Shaki hadn't been allowed to stay out on bail and had made a different personal decision, Corneisha might still be alive. This tragic failure in the system allowed Shaki to continue her dangerous behavior without facing the consequences she should have. Every time Shaki was released on bail, she had another chance to continue her threats, eventually leading to Corneisha's murder. Corneisha called the police 13 times between January and November 2022. However, the response times were inconsistent, ranging from minutes to hours, depending on officer availability and how the dispatcher classified the calls. Officers often didn't have immediate access to important details about previous incidents or restraining orders. This lack of information led them to treat each call as an isolated event, not part of a bigger pattern. In some cases, officers left without filing reports because Shaki had already left. The most troubling instance happened just 1 week before Corneisha's murder, when Shaki was seen sitting outside Corneisha's home for hours. The officer who responded said they couldn't take action because there were no direct threats or contact. This narrow view of the restraining order left Corneisha vulnerable, even though she had legal protection. At 2:15 p.m., Corneisha picked up her 2-year-old from daycare because the child had a mild fever. A receipt from a nearby pharmacy showed she bought medicine for the child at 2:45 p.m. Neighbors saw her come back home around 3 p.m., carrying grocery bags and holding her toddler. What Corneisha didn't know was that Shaki Perkins had been following her all day. Surveillance footage from a house nearby showed Shaki's car parked across the street at 4:30 p.m. Around 5:45 p.m., Shaki knocked on Corneisha's door. Instead of banging on the door, she knocked softly, which might have made Corneisha feel safer. Even though there was a restraining order, Corneisha opened the door, probably hoping to deal with the situation quietly while her toddler napped nearby. At 5:50 p.m., neighbors heard loud voices followed by a brief silence. Moments later, 3 gunshots rang out. Ballistics later confirmed that Shakia fired 3 shots at close range, hitting Corneisha in the chest and abdomen. The handgun used in the shooting had been bought legally just 2 weeks before. Home security footage showed Corneisha's 2-year-old child entering the room during the shooting, witnessing the tragic moment. The child's cries were heard as Shakia calmly walked past and left without acknowledging the child. Shakia made no attempt to call emergency services. Instead, she drove to her sister's apartment, where she stayed for the next few hours until police found her. A neighbor, hearing the gunshots and the child's cries, called 911 at 6:07. Emergency responders arrived quickly but found Corneisha already dead. The toddler, though physically unharmed, was covered in their mother's blood and deeply traumatized. Police secured the scene, and Corneisha's sister, Tarika, was contacted to take custody of the child. By evening, all of Corneisha's children were informed of their mother's death. The oldest child immediately identified Shakia as the person responsible, having witnessed her abusive behavior for years. Shakia tried to avoid capture, but less than 4 hours later, she was located. Her use of a cell phone led police to her location through cell tower signals. At 10:23 p.m., a tactical team surrounded the apartment building. Unlike her calm demeanor during the murder, Shakia was emotionally unstable during her arrest, alternating between crying and showing indifference. As she was taken into custody, she repeated, "She made me do this." The investigation uncovered more evidence, including the murder weapon in Shakia's car and a list of Corneisha's daily routine. On Shakia's phone, a draft message read, "It's done now. You can't leave me again." Shakia Perkins was charged with first-degree murder, felony firearm possession, and third-degree child cruelty for committing the murder in front of Corneisha's young child. In December 2022, the district attorney added charges for violating the restraining order and stalking at Shaki's arraignment. Despite strong evidence against her, Shaki pleaded not guilty. The judge denied her bail, citing the risk of her fleeing and the danger she posed to the community. Prosecutors plan to seek the maximum sentence, which could be life in prison without parole. After Corneisha's death, her 4 children faced deep sadness while adjusting to new living situations. Corneisha's sister, Corneisha Butler, took in all 4 children, moving into Corneisha's home to give them some sense of stability in the midst of their loss.